This is another iRaw podcast. We podcast to make the world a better place for animals.
This is the Talking Animal Law podcast, brought to you every 2 weeks by the UK Centre for Animal Law and hosted by Paula Sparks, Director of A-Law. But it's not just for lawyers, it's for anyone who cares about animals. So no matter who you are, if you want to know more about animal protection, news, ethics and animal law reform, then this is the podcast for you.
Welcome back to the Talking Animal Law podcast. We're joined today by two of the team from Cats Protection, the UK's largest cat welfare charity. Founded in 1927, it has evolved into a modern, dynamic organisation supporting cats and their families. It's involved in education, campaigning, policy, as well as neutering and rehoming. And my own Cats Protection cat is called Skittles. We're joined today to talk about the Cats and Stats report published by Cats Protection at the end of last year. And it's a fascinating read that you can find on their website, and we'll share details after the podcast. Madison Rogers is Head of Advocacy, Campaigns and Government Relations. Madison joined Cats Protection in 2017 and since 2022 has headed up the Advocacy, Campaigns and Government Relations team, which campaign to improve cat welfare across the UK. Madison has a first-class degree in politics and international relations from the University of Bath and formerly worked for a public affairs agency in London. Madison is currently an advisor on the Senior Women in Public Affairs Network Committee, representing women in the industry who work for charities, and she has a Cats Protection cat called Moodles. Stefan Blakiston Moore joined Cats Protection in 2020 after spending a decade working in Parliament. Alongside his role at Cats Protection as Advocacy and Campaigns Manager, Stefan is the founder of Odd Days Out, which works to highlight British curiosities and historical footnotes. As well as his work running Cats Protection advocacy campaigns, Stefan oversees the group that work on the content of Cats Protection's Cats and Their Stats report and directly leads on the market section of the report. His Cats Protection cat is called Neve. So I'm very pleased to welcome Madison and Stefan to join us for a discussion about the report and wider issues around cats and cat welfare today. Madison and Stefan, I'm so pleased you could join today. Thank you very much for coming to talk about the Cats and Stats report and all the other issues that we're going to talk through today around cat welfare. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. We're excited to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited. Perhaps if I can start by asking you, Stefan, to tell us a little bit about the Cats report. It was published, I think, at the end of last year. I found it really fascinating read. So perhaps you could just outline a little bit about the report for our listeners.
Sure, yes. So Cats Protection's Cats and Their Stats report is something that we started back in 2020. So the report published back in October, November time was the fourth iteration of the report. It is the UK's largest survey of cat owners. That's where the data from it comes. We speak to around 10,000 people for the report. That is cat owners and non-cat owners, crucially, because we want to speak to non-cat owners to understand why they haven't got a cat. And if they used to have a cat, what the reasons are for them not having one anymore. So there's some really vital data we can get in there. And with that large sample size, we can really dive deep into owners' perceptions. And it is important to state that this is cat owners' perceptions. But from our view, that's what we need to understand. We need to understand what cat owners are thinking. We need to understand their choices around veterinary care, their choices around behaviour, their perceptions around their cat's behaviour. And crucially, that we'll get into in a bit more detail, how they got their cat and why they chose to get the cat they did. So it is an absolutely vital report for us at Cats Protection in terms of myself and Madison work directly in advocacy, and in terms of talking to government and influencing our key stakeholders. Having this evidence base behind us is incredibly important, because it's really painting a picture that shows how we how we react, how we go about getting our cats, interacting with our cats is changing drastically, and it's vital that legislation keeps up with it. And I'll also say we do produce reports for Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. We're going to mainly be talking about the UK data today in the main report, but we do have regional boosts so that we can get significant sample sizes in the devolved administrations as well.
No, that's brilliant. And can you give us a short summary of some of the key statistics that came from the survey?
Yes, in the latest report, we've found that there are 11 million pet cats across the UK. That is broadly the same as the previous year, and that does mean that 26% of households are owning a cat, roughly. So a very popular pet, of course, as we know. In terms of the types of people who are getting cats, it's important to say there's no such thing as a typical cat owner. There is a huge variance here. However, there are certain shifts we're seeing, and it's skewing in a certain way, which is important for us to understand as a welfare charity, and for government to understand in terms of how things are changing. So we are seeing a move towards a slightly younger demographic than the UK as a whole. We're seeing sort of movement for people who are acquiring cats in the last 12 months. More recent cat acquisitions are coming from higher socioeconomic groups. And we're also seeing acquisition in more urban areas, perhaps where there's more built up, population levels are more built up, and perhaps there's higher density properties, so people are in flats. So there's these changes here. So we are seeing more indoor cats as well. Now, some of the big findings for us are around how people are obtaining cats. And this is when we first produced this report, it was a bit of a shock how drastically things were changing. And we'll come into this in a bit more detail, I think, later on in the discussion. But we are seeing pedigrees becoming more popular. Pedigrees and purebred cats are what people are often looking at now. There's more people buying their cats. There's a bigger overall market for cats, and more people are going online. And of course, this all links to those shifts we're seeing in who's getting cats. And of course, that has other knock-on effects. So where we're seeing those more younger cat owners, they're, of course, where they're going for advice is changing as well. And so it's really important for us to be up to date on where to make sure the right information is getting out to cat owners. They are going online. They're going online to get cats. They're going online for advice. So social media and TikTok and things like that are on the rise for where people are going. So it's all vital for us to consider how to go about communicating with cat owners from this. And there's a lot of important information which I think we'll cover around microchipping and general veterinary care in the report. That is, we're not vets, so we won't go into quite as much depth in that, but it's all really important information to understand what cat owners are thinking.
Yes, I was really interested to hear you talk there about the shift away from the strays, the moggies, to pedigree cats. So let's definitely revisit that, because that's to me is really interesting. I've only had moggies from Cats Protection, so may that continue. But what reason do most people give for why they own a cat? And do the responses show that people see their cat as part of their family?
Yeah, so as Stefan just outlined, 26% of UK households have a cat. So we really are a nation of cat lovers out there. And in terms of the reasons that people gave in the report, personal well-being was a really huge driver for cat ownership. So people said they got a cat to help them with companionship, to reduce loneliness and to reduce stress. And overall, 92% of people said that they thought their cat was part of their family, which I think is really endearing to come through in the report. And I personally would, agree with those people. My own cat, Moodles, is very much a lap cat. She loves a cuddle. And that's definitely like one of the main reasons why I got a cat, to keep me company when I go home from work. She's there, often meowing or yowling at the front door as I make my way home. So it's just really nice to come home to that cat and have them there with you in the evening. So I think that's something that, many people across the UK are experiencing, and a real driver in why they did get a cat in the first place.
And that's a really high percentage of people seeing their cat as part of the family unit. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because cats, in common with other animals, have a legal status as property. So no different from the chair or the table, other inanimate objects. But your research seems to be suggesting people don't see their cats in that way, but they do see them as part of the family dynamic. So it's interesting to consider the implications for this in terms of policy in areas such as housing. What work has Cats Protection been involved with that does recognise this human-animal bond in those type of areas?
Yeah, I think the standout stat for me in the report is that 1 million more households could have a cat if all landlords allowed pets. You know, for people at the moment, unfortunately, pet ownership is a privilege reserved for those who own their own homes. And, you know, at Cats Protection, we believe that just because you rent your home, shouldn't deny you the opportunity to be able to experience that joy and companionship that we just spoke about from cat ownership. And, you know, what type of housing you live in shouldn't be a barrier to ownership. So Cats Protection has done a lot of work on this issue over the years. So we have a campaign called Perfect Landlords, which is all about trying to empower tenants and give them advice about how they can rent with their cat. So we suggest to people they create a pet CV to outline their behaviours of their cat, to show that they're a responsible cat owner through giving the details of the vet their cat's registered with. And this also really helps the landlords as well, because it does, you know, it does help to show that person is responsible and gives them peace of mind when they're accepting a pet into their property. And we've also, you know, done work with landlords and renting associations to prove the business benefit, because some of our evidence does suggest that people stay for longer if they're able to have a cat, because they are able to make that, you know, rented house their home. So I think it is a sort of win-win situation, you know, for the landlord, the tenant, and of course the cat. So in terms of policy at the moment, the government has announced its renters reform bill, which Cats Protection is supportive of. And if passed, this would give tenants a right to request a pet in rented accommodation. So hopefully that will start to make it a little bit easier for people to be able to experience that joy and companionship that cats bring to their lives. Again, on a personal note, when I first got Moodles, I did live in private rented accommodation, and really sadly, she was actually given up to the charity because a former owner's landlord didn't allow pets. So she kind of came full circle, and I was lucky enough to be able to convince my landlord to allow me to have cats and you know, to enjoy her company. But it was also quite stressful in the back of my mind, thinking, what if, you know, my landlord sells, or they want to raise the rent and I can't afford it anymore? What am I going to do? Because it's really difficult to be able to afford somewhere that maybe would allow me to have pets. So even in that circumstance, it was, you know, stressful to think about how I would ensure that I could continue to care for Moodles. So we really want to make sure that others don't experience that, and that it does become easier to be able to rent with a pet, and pet ownership isn't just a privilege. Sorry. In terms of what you were just saying there as well about cats with their legal status as a property, we're also doing some work around theft as well, because of this legal status. The theft of a cat is treated as the theft of any inanimate object. So if your television's stolen, it's treated exactly the same way as if your cat is stolen. So we really want a law to recognise the emotional impact that theft has on the cat and the welfare on the owner, and the welfare impacts that it has on the cat. So we are calling for a specific offence to be made for the theft of a pet. And again, there is movement on this in policy. So at the moment, there's a private members bill going through the House of Commons, which would make pet theft a specific offence, and this includes both cats and dogs. So we're really hopeful that does pass, and that recognition of sentience and the emotional impact that a theft has on a family, you know, is recognised in law.
It's interesting. I think some of our listeners will be aware of the work that Cats Protection does, rehoming cats with the adoptions, supporting neutering programs and so on. But it's so much more than that, isn't it? Because what you've described goes beyond policy work. You're also advocating in different forums for cats and their families as well.
That's right. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I mean, you know, the charity sort of rehomes around 30,000 cats, but through the advocacy work, we're lucky enough, you know, hopefully to be able to reach that 11 million cats that Stefan mentioned across the whole of the UK and ensure that everybody, all cats are having their welfare considered, and, you know, owners are able to enjoy that companionship and love that you get from a cat.
I know it really resonated when you were talking about your experience with Moodles, because I've had those conversations on a personal level with other people who have felt insecure because of their situation renting, or other people I've met who have said, you know, I've had to surrender my dog or my cat. I know it's really hard on people. So it was really interesting to hear that experience as well. Another issue that has been the subject of quite a bit of scrutiny, I think, particularly with dogs, but is that of extreme breeding, so extreme conformations or characteristics that are not necessarily good for their welfare. Is this also an issue for cats?
Yes, it is something we're really concerned about at Cats Protection, about where this is going, and this sort of form over welfare issue, cats being bred for aesthetic purposes, that is detrimental to their health, is a really big concern. From the cats and their stats report data, we do know, as I mentioned, that pedigrees are becoming increasingly popular. Now, what we found with that looking at the data, it's 42% of cats obtained in the last 12 months were pedigree. Now, of course, not all of them are going to have these welfare issues, but it is a really big shift, and it's a monumental shift. Looking at the data from more than 5 years ago, we were talking about 17% of the cats were pedigree / purebred, as opposed to 42% now. So this is a really drastic shift that we're seeing, and we weren't fully aware of this, and I don't think it's been fully monitored. So in terms of the types of breeds that are becoming more popular is being difficult to get a handle on. But the report does tell us that we are seeing some of those breeds that really have those extreme conformations, the ones that can't even be bred out of it. For example, the Scottish fold, which has a genetic defect which causes its famous flat ears, but also means that it is virtually guaranteed to develop early arthritis. That is coming up, and we are seeing that now, as it is 1% of the pet cat population. Now, that is small, yes, it's just at 1%, but it was negligible a few years ago, so it is on the rise. And again, we're talking a lot of cats still when we're talking 1% of the pet cat population. So there is a really big concern for us there. So cats like the Scottish fold, we have seen in some places moves to prevent them being bred. In Scotland, there are regulations for licensed sellers, licensed breeders, and there are breeds where things are more complicated. For example, Persians, which can be very brachycephalic. We refer to them as ultra flat-faced Persians at times, where they can be prized for their looks. That's what people going online will sometimes think of a cat with an extremely flat face that is going to struggle. It's going to struggle to eat and breathe at times, and it's this horrific welfare situation for the breed. And that, again, that is becoming more popular. That is 3% of the pet cat population are now being reported as Persian in the cats report, which is up from 2% the previous year. So there is this gradual shift, and there are risks of popularization. There was a big film this year prominently featuring a Scottish fold that has got a lot of media attention. And of course, that's getting out there, and people are seeing these types of cats, they're looking them up, and there's not necessarily the understanding that these issues exist for cats at all, as of course it is a big issue for dogs and getting that understanding out there. But with cats, I don't think people are quite aware. They will go up and they will think, oh, that's a cute cat, let's look it up. And an element, we're moving towards this more pedigree dominant market, at the same time that people are still seeing them as, oh, it's a cat, it's just a cat, let's get a cat type thing, and oh, what type? And it's not quite it's not quite there in the public consciousness, which is, it isn't with any animals, but I think cats are particularly behind on that. And so there are some real risks coming up for us in that area.
No, it's interesting. So do you think we need stronger laws to prevent people breeding cats or any animals in such a way that the animal is likely to have a lifetime of poor health and welfare? Does law play a role here, do you think?
Definitely, yes. We do want to see cat breeding regulations introduced. We do have breeding regulations in Scotland. We would like to see improvements to them as well, but at least we do have some regulations in place there. Specifically, what we would like to see is if anyone is breeding 2 or more litters a year, then we think they should be required to obtain a license. And we want protections in place for those cats that are being bred as well. We would like to see a cat should have no more than 6 litters in their lifetime for queens, and a maximum of 3 litters within a 2-year period to prevent that overbreeding that we have seen in our centres, where we've ended up with cats that are in a very poor state, and sadly they often don't make it from having been treated like this. And that's why we also want to see a ban on queens being bred after 6 years of age. And then, of course, that point around the Scottish Folds and the Munchkins and those cats with extreme characteristics, and that's important to say, it's those extreme characteristics that we really need to be mindful of, because people will call these breeds of cats different things. So we need to be making sure that there's bans against those things that we see, like the cartilage defect in the Scottish Fold. It should be like with the Scottish guidance, that it should be pretty clear you should not be allowed to breed a Scottish Fold, because we're going to end up with litters of kittens with this genetic defect that people won't understand, and this cat will end up in horrific pain. People, of course, are struggling with this as well, because they're going to end up with big vet bills dealing with all of this as well, because it's in a terrible state, these cats. And crucially, to get this to work, we do need that training support for local authority inspectors, because these are complicated issues. There are distinctions, particularly with the Persians, where we're seeing different levels of the issues that really need to be looked out for. So that would be absolutely vital for us, as well as having these breeding regulations, that there is really strong guidance out there for anyone inspecting and involved in checking these breeders.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I understand that Cats Protection also lobbied for a new law to make microchipping of cats compulsory, and that will come in, I think, from June 2024. So why did Cats Protection feel there was a need for this, and what should owners do to prepare for this new law?
Yeah, Cats Protection led the campaign calling for compulsory microchipping of pet cats, and we are absolutely delighted that the government introduced regulations which come into force on the 10th of June 2024 for cats in England. Really, the idea behind the law is hopefully to get more cats reunited with their owners. So currently, under sort of a voluntary measure for people to microchip their cats, the rate of cats that are microchipped has been quite stuck around the 70% mark. So currently, around across the UK, there are actually 3 million cats that aren't microchipped, and we know that cats are very curious creatures, so they might jump in the back of a delivery van, they might escape out of a window, and then it can be very difficult to locate that cat if they do get lost. You know, it really is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So the microchips give the cats the best chance of being reunited, and it's a really swift and easy process to have a microchip implanted into a cat. And then again, a reunification can take place in as quick as 5 minutes. If a cat's scanned, the owner lives down the road and they can come and collect their cat that easy. So we are encouraging people who don't have their cats microchipped to visit their vets to find out more. And then people who do have their cats microchipped, we're encouraging to check their chip details and make sure that they're up to date, because without an up-to-date address or phone number, it can be really difficult to track an owner down. So want to make sure that people are aware of that, especially if they've recently moved home or that they haven't checked their details for a number of years. In terms of the report, what we found was that of the people who don't have their cats microchipped, 27% said the reason that this was because their cat doesn't go outside, or 18% also said it's because their cat doesn't stray far. But we do want to emphasise that even if you have got a cat that lives indoor only, or maybe just potters around in the garden, it's still really important to make sure that you do have that cat microchipped. You know, if a firework goes off, they might get scared and bolt, or if it's a hot summer's day, they might manage to sneak out of a window. So it is really important that anyone who's got a cat does have it microchipped, and hopefully provides that peace of mind. For Cats Protection as well, if we do get a cat in that isn't microchipped, or if the microchip details are out of date, we at the moment we keep cats for 28 days before we even start the rehoming process, to allow us to find time to try and find an owner. And you know, for that cat, it's not great welfare for them to be in our care for so long. And it also prevents us from helping other genuine strays and abandoned cats. So we're really hoping that the new regulations will help us to reunite more cats swiftly, and then we can get on helping other cats that need our help and care.
Well, that's something that owners can do. What about areas where owners might not either be aware of risks, or they might not be able to mitigate against those risks, such as the toxicity of lilies? I know that's been there's been some coverage about that, and one of the banes of my life, fireworks, and the impact of fireworks. And my cat doesn't seem to be so bothered, but my dog does. But what's Cats Protection doing to support owners in these situations?
Yeah, so on lilies, the report found that 53% of owners were actually unaware that lilies were toxic to cats, and it's every part of the lily, and it can even be the water that the lily is sitting in. So a cat can just brush past a lily and then lick the pollen off its fur, and that can unfortunately be fatal, and be fatal very quickly for that cat. So they are a real danger to pets. And yeah, as the report says, sadly a lot of people don't know, and it's not just about cat owners not knowing, it's about non-cat owners being aware as well, because you might give lilies as a gift. You know, it might be a really nice occasion and you want to thank somebody, and then, you know, unfortunately there can be really terrible consequences from that. So Cats Protection does a lot of work to raise awareness with cat owners, to say, you know, don't buy lilies, don't have lilies in your house if you have got a cat. There are some real touch points in the calendar every year that come up, like Mother's Day, which will be happening in a few weeks. So we do a lot of awareness raising around these moments, to try and, you know, ensure that people do know that lilies are poisonous. But we've also been working with retailers as well to try and get them to change their lily labelling. So sometimes the warning can be on the back of the label in tiny print and it's not clear, but we would like all retailers to have a clear warning on the front of any labels on flowers to say that lilies are toxic to cats, and to have it on the bit that doesn't get peeled off when you peel off that all important price label, as we do know that flowers are often given as a gift. Turning to fireworks that you also just mentioned, from the report, 64% said that they'd witnessed their cat having some sign of stress due to fireworks. So they can be, really stressful for cats to experience. It can be hard for owners to plan in those cases. You know, if their cat's a cat that goes indoors and outdoors, it might be that the cat's outside and it gets scared if it hears the fireworks, so it can jolt off, which can be very distressing both for the cat and the owner. So we're calling for government to restrict the unplanned use of fireworks, so that owners can better prepare for those situations with their cats. So there'll be some notice that would be given, and then they can keep their cats in at that time. In Scotland, there has been some progress made. So they've implemented zones where fireworks can't be set off, and animal rescue centres can apply to have a zone around their centre. So hopefully this will help the animals to be less stressed in those experience, and give that, you know, consideration to the impact that fireworks do have on our pets.
No, that's good to hear. Just going back briefly to breeding again, because again, there's been quite a bit of focus over the last few years on low welfare breeding practices for dogs, and dogs being bred in poor conditions, sometimes under-socialized, and can be passing for significant sums of money. So do you see the same or similar problems with cats? And is this something on the government's radar? Is anyone tackling this if it is a problem?
Yes, definitely. This is one thing I think that the CATS report is quite clear on, is that cat acquisition is changing quite drastically. Now, cats are certainly moving to a place where their financial value is getting quite widely recognised, and regulations are behind on that. This is, as I say, we've had these findings, and they've been quite shocking from the CATS report about how quickly this market has moved. And of course, as soon as we've got that financial incentive, there's a risk that those unscrupulous individuals are going to move into the market. And of course, for us, the risk is, if you're just talking about dogs in this sense, we're missing a huge part of the picture here. And cats are, yes, they are going to be slightly behind on value, but it's quickly growing. And you make things harder on the dog side, but not the cat side. These unscrupulous individuals are interested in making money. The cats are being put at risk. So we're very clear on that we do need more. And that's where that need for cat breeding regulation needs to come in, to really put down a marker to say cats are being taken seriously here. These are not going to be an easy win for those unscrupulous individuals. And we do know there's cases where cats are being bred in poor conditions. Kittens are being sold underage or sick, and they can be sold for thousands of pounds. There's huge sums of money there, because remember the point about the pedigrees. We are seeing more and more pedigree cats, and how people are presented cats is changing drastically. So as that trend away from moggies towards higher value pedigrees continues, we really need to crack down on that risk of cats being exploited for profit without any regard for their welfare. And we have seen this. This isn't just theoretical. We feature a case study in the latest CATS report from the RSPCA, which is one of the most shocking case studies we've seen, and I thought really brought this to life. The fact that there was a couple that were investigated, and they did receive a jail sentence, but they'd been doing this for years. They were using multiple names. They were selling kittens for thousands of pounds. They were, in some cases, I believe, buying them elsewhere and relisting them for profit as well. So there's all this risk out there, and people are going into this market thinking, I'm buying a cat, and it's and thinking how it was 10, 15 years ago, or how I was getting a cat when I was younger. It was either a rescue, or it was somebody down the road who you heard had a litter of kittens. Well, things have changed drastically, but we're still going into that place going, oh, let's get a cat from someone, and not really understanding the huge profit incentive behind that. And of course, when somebody's buying a cat, there's a huge amount of emotion involved in that. So it's very difficult to get that thinking in there about how careful people need to be, which is really why we need those cat breeding regulations in place, because cases like this one where the RSPC investigated, there's huge sums of money. I think they estimated around £280,000 over the period that these people were doing this. So cats are at risk of becoming an easy target. There's less scrutiny around cats, so it's a huge risk. And that is, again, if we don't get those regulations in place, there's more and more risk coming for cats down the line as this market continues to shift.
And I imagine, Stefan, that online sales must be a part of this. Is this something that you're seeing as part of the problem, that people are either buying cats online or maybe even rehoming cats online without going to a registered charity? And if that is an issue, what sort of measures would you like to see to tackle that?
I mean, it certainly is an issue, and I'm always slightly careful around this, because with online, we all go online for everything now. It's naturally where people are going to go. So as much as we can say don't go online to get a cat, of course people are going to go online. I mean, rescues have websites, people are going to go online. So it's making sure that there's that understanding out there, because there has been this shift. And it was partly, of course, people always say, was COVID what moved it online and more people? To an extent, yes, there was a bit of a push, but of course, everything has gone online anyway. So when we're looking at cats across the pet cat population, around 63% of those that were purchased were found via an online source. And looking at the last 12 months, it's around 71%. So it is growing. More and more people are getting cats online. Now, that has changed things quite drastically because, as I mentioned in my last comment around this, when we think back about how we used to get cats, there was a real local element to this. You'd hear more about people getting cats or having kittens that you could go and get type thing. Whereas, of course, how we communicate now is online. We go onto Facebook, and of course, as soon as we're online, that's changed. You're not just hearing locally, you are seeing a national market and in many cases an international market, because we know on Facebook there are cats being sold with worldwide shipping. So there are some risks there. Now, to help with this, there is an organisation called the Pet Advertising Advisory Group, which Cats Protection is a member of, and that sets some advertising guidelines which are voluntary, but a number of the top classified websites do follow these. Now, this seeks to improve the welfare of cats and other pets being bought and sold online. And that's really positive. We've got some great engagement from a number of websites with that. And actually through that, there's some of the classified websites have taken further steps. They've gone beyond where regulations are, and they are preventing the sale of Scottish foals. They've taken a decision on welfare grounds that they shouldn't be sold on their platform. So there's some really great work there. But of course, people aren't just going on the classified websites. And there does seem to be a slightly cat-specific thing here. I think we've seemed to have found this more with cats than other species, but people use social media. Now, that's a huge risk. Social media companies, and we are predominantly talking Facebook here. That does seem to be what comes up in the answer, in the answers in the cats report about where people acquired their cats from. Facebook, of course, is not a classified website. It doesn't sign up to the Pet Advertising Advisory Group guidelines. So it is essentially, we often call it the Wild West of the cat market. It's a free-for-all. And we've done some work. We've gone on there searching for cat listings, and they're just everywhere. Now, interestingly enough, Facebook and a lot of the social media companies do have rules against the sale of pets. There are various stipulations around that, such as allowing businesses to operate, but it can get quite complicated. Generally, when you go to report an advert of a cat on Facebook, it will say about their rule against private individuals selling. So essentially, we don't think we should be seeing as many on social media as we are. And I think my theory behind this and why we're seeing so many cats on social media is that sort of that community element to cats and cat acquisition, that it would be a local thing. You'd get a local litter. Maybe people are going onto their local Facebook groups because it's that community area. It's still, as much as people talk about declining use of Facebook, it is still a place where there are local groups. So people are going on there, but they are not necessarily just getting the cat locally. They're realizing there's a choice. They're realizing, oh, I can choose a breed. I can, even if I'm going on a classified website, I'm instantly presented with, what type of cat do you want? Whereas, again, a few years back, that wasn't a consideration, but anecdotally, I feel it is something in the conversation now. People will ask, what type of cat have you got? So it's really changing things, the online market. And we do want to see the websites continuing to engage with the Pet Advertising Advisory Group. And we would like to see social media companies doing a lot more on this, enforcing those rules where they've got rules against pet sales and really strengthening them, saying, look, you shouldn't be buying pets on these platforms, because there are huge risks, and there's huge risk of impulse. There's also scams out there. And I should give Meta some credit here, Meta, the company who own Facebook, of course. When we raised some of these issues before, they told us they'd taken down a number of groups. And we've also seen on the platform now a full screen alert. So if you're searching cats for sale on Facebook now, it does tell you, warning, content you see might be against our rules. So that's really positive. But we are still seeing in the cats report data about 1 in 5 purchased cats coming from Facebook. And that's something we've never been able to look at before. The cats report has provided vital data on that. So we really need to see those improvements in the websites and social media companies taking things seriously and understanding that buying a pet is a unique purchase. It's a huge emotional investment. And the pets are at risk from those unscrupulous individuals, and the customers or the cat buyers or any pet buyer is as well, because they're invested in that pet. So they're at risk of getting cats that are unwell. They're at risk of being scammed, and they're potentially funding a trade that they wouldn't necessarily want to, but they are committed to this animal once they've seen it. So it's a huge risk, and it's a very complex issue, but it's something we are very keen to work on and work with websites and social media companies going forward.
And in terms of the protection, consumer protection for people buying cats and for the welfare of the cats themselves, I imagine that traceability is an issue, particularly if we are seeing online sales. And I did read about a new EU law that had been proposed requiring EU nations to operate national databases that should be operable and speak to each other at EU level. Is this something that Cats Protection supports, has been involved with, is aware of? Are there any other proposals to tackle illegal breeding in the supply chain from abroad, where you have this internation trade?
Yeah, it's probably worth having a quick note here just on sort of the cats we're seeing from abroad, because again, it's one of those emerging areas where we've seen it talked about a lot in terms of dogs and puppy smuggling, and we are very concerned about cats and kittens coming in from abroad. Now, the latest data we have, because we do ask people if they got a cat from abroad in the cats in their stats report, and the latest one was around 3% of cats that have been obtained in the last 12 months had come from an overseas source. Now, I think we were talking about 50,000 cats, so we are talking quite a large number of cats there. So that is a concern. Now, looking at the government's official figures for commercial imports, that's around 6,859, I think, for that same period. We had to do a bit of a calculation to work out exactly how it fits in. So it's slightly rough, but that's what the official figures say for that period. Now, of course, there are potentially some other things going on there, and we did actually see a decrease in this year's report because there had been various restrictions put in place about bringing cats in from overseas following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So there was that. So we were anticipating a bit of a drop, and we did see that, but that's still a high number, and we are concerned. Now, the positive from that is the restrictions that were brought in did seem to bring down the number. And we are concerned about how high that number is. So that it does show that sort of those types of regulations can work. But did you want to?
Yeah, on the policy side, there is another private member's bill making its way through Parliament as well, called the Pet Importation Bill, and this will hopefully restrict the movement of cats, dogs, and ferrets into the UK. So it will bring in an age restriction, so you won't be able to bring in cats that are under 6 months. It includes a ban on cats with mutilations. So for cats, that generally is a declawing, which is a very painful procedure for cats, and effectively the equivalent for humans would be having your finger chopped off at your knuckle. So not something that we want to see being imported into the UK, and is in fact already illegal in the UK. And it would also bring in restrictions on the age a pregnant cat can be brought into the UK, and finally reduce the number of cats that can be brought in from in a single vehicle. So at the moment, in theory, if 5 people came into the UK in a car, they could bring in 25 cats with them, but this bill would limit that to 5, and we would actually like to see that limited down even further to 3, because from the cats report, very few people have got more than 3 cats. So a legitimate reason why you might be bringing a cat into the UK is that you're relocating here, but we don't think it would be an inconvenience if that number was brought down even lower, and the benefits of stopping illegal trade would hopefully outweigh any inconvenience to people. So Cats Protection is really supportive of this bill that's going through Parliament, and we do hope that it is able to pass and help to restrict some of the trade of cats coming in. There is also a disease control perspective as well, because cats smuggled into the UK can bring with them what are known as zoonotic diseases, so diseases that can pass from cat to human. And we want to be able to ensure our biosecurity in the UK. So this bill would also help with that as well.
And thinking about the practical impact of these trends that we've been discussing today, with more purchases of cats from third sources, and with purchasing pedigree cats, it strikes me that's likely to put a strain on organisations like Cats Protection, who are trying to rehome cats. Are there any other risks to cat welfare that we haven't covered?
Yes, certainly. We talk about this in the report as a perfect storm for the rescue sector, because we are in a situation where, sadly, a lot of people are looking to give up their cats at the moment. With the cost of living crisis, of course, a lot of people are struggling. Now, we're coupling that with the fact that actually we have a very buoyant market for cats. People are going out and buying them. As I mentioned, we're seeing that shift in socioeconomic groupings that are more likely to have acquired a cat recently. So there is this shift where those that are looking to get a cat at the moment, they are more likely to buy. We're talking in the last 12 months, it's around 40% of cats that are acquired were purchased, compared to 15% adopted. And that line for more and more, that line of people buying cats is going up. That's on the rise. And for adoption, that does seem to be on the decrease. Now, we've spoken with the Association of Dog and Cat Homes about this, and they did say, I think we report this in the report, that in the previous year, there had been a 5.1% reduction in cat adoptions. So there is this real shift that's happening. Now, this is, of course, a huge problem, because our services are stretched as people are looking to give up cats. Our waiting list for people looking to give up cats is growing. And we, of course, need to make sure that we're getting the cats out there. And the sector does seem to be starting to have this issue. So it is a big concern. And as people buy them, they might not necessarily be getting them from the best place always. And we do have something called the kitten checklist that we would advise anyone to look at who is looking to buy a cat, that provides all the guidance and things you should check. But of course, as we've sort of discussed, it's this extremely emotional purchase, and somebody will see a sick kitten that is being sold and they will purchase it, trying to save it. And of course, they're going to get themselves potentially in issues with that, and whether they can keep that cat longer term, and whether that does become something that somebody is ending up trying to give up to a rescue. So it does have the potential to do that. And of course, when we're getting more of those cats in, there's more complex needs. They're going to take longer to be looked after. They're going to require more treatment. So there are massive implications for Cats Protection and the rescue sector around this. And we are hoping to be speaking at the Association of Dog and Cats Home Conference on this, to say, look, there is, as well as this supply side issue where more and more people want to give up cats, there's a demand side issue that's bubbling under the surface that, unless we address, there's going to be problems for us further down the line. And of course, I mean, one of the other things we do want to see is the regulation of animal welfare establishments, because the phrase adoption is used out there a lot as well, I'd say, online, and people will sometimes think they're adopting, and the condition that the cats are being got from needs to be looked at in terms of making sure there's public confidence and trust in the rescue sector, and that's something we're really clear on.
And finally, thank you. You mentioned the cost of living crisis. Are you seeing a real impact from this? And how are you responding to those challenges yourself as an organisation? Because it must be challenging times for you too.
Yeah, Cats Protection, is seeing the impact of cost of living. So in the report, over a third of owners said that they'd been significantly and negatively impacted by rising living costs. Worryingly, a third of owners were having doubts about if they would be able to pay vet bills, if their cat did become sick or injured. And 22% of cat owners were concerned about being able to pay other bills and living costs within the next 12 months. So this is really a significant issue for cat owners. I think, sadly, as well, the report found that 13% of people who used to have a cat but no longer do was because they had to give their cat up because they couldn't afford to keep it. And that had rose from 8% the year before. So quite a significant increase there in people giving their cats up, making that really hard decision to relinquish their pet because unfortunately they just weren't able to afford anymore. But Cats Protection has been working in partnerships with charitable and corporate organisations to deliver pet food to people in need via the Fair Share scheme, which is one of the UK's largest charities that focuses on hunger and food waste. And we have been able to help thousands of cat owners through this scheme alleviate that pressure that comes from not being able to afford cat food. And our own branches and centres across the country are also working with food banks in local communities to try and deliver both cat food and also cat litter as well to people in need, because lots of cats do have a litter tray, and litter has increased in price over the last couple of years. So our own scheme is supporting both the food and litter. And then I think also people want to be able to have fun with their cats. So we do have lots of cost of living advice for how you can create cheap and easy cat toys to use with your cats, which is actually a really fun way, to engage children. There's things on there such as building feeding enrichment for your cats. So there's one that includes using old toilet rolls that you sellotape together, and then the cat can pour out the dry biscuits from that, and that can keep cats entertained for quite some time, and quite fun to be able to build yourself as well as an owner. So yeah, we've been trying to help owners as much as we can at this this really difficult time. So if anybody does want further advice, they can visit our website to find out more about how we might be able to help them there.
Well, thank you so much. It's so nice to end on with that positive note. And I think of people going off now and trying to make their DIY cat toys. I'm going to go and check that myself. I'm also just full of admiration for the work that you do that spans the practical, policy, law, and advocacy, and working with different parts of society. So, thank you for coming to talk to us about this work that you do that is so important for the cats and the people who keep them.
Thank you so much for having us on. Really enjoyed it.
Yes, it's been great to talk.
Oh, thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening from. And if you give us a good review, it will help others to find us. And don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a show.
For more information about the work of the UK Centre for Animal Law, please go to www.alaw.org.uk.
For more great iRaw podcasts, visit irawpod.com. That's iroarpod.com.